Hello and welcome. My name is Kelsey Livingston. I am here as your host today for this episode in Artists in Residences. This is Baton Rouge Gallery's twice a week check-in with artists of all kinds. We are doing this right now because, since we can't have you in our space just yet, more details on that to come, we invite artists to come on and chat with us to bring us virtually into their space. Quick bit of housekeeping before we get started. This broadcast is a little delayed because of tech issues. I'm very sorry about that. But we're going to press forward and the show is just going to move on. I want to thank our partners at Breck for letting us live in City Park for as long as we have. I want to take a second to thank our donors and our members because without you guys, nothing that we do is even remotely possible. Today, we were going to talk about the abstracted landscape, and my guest today is Linda Jeffers, and we were going to have James Burke on with us as well, but, with tech issues being what they are, we're just going to press forward with Linda. That being said, James is here in our backstage, so he'll be able to type in and we'll be able to kind of respond that way. But it's going to be a little bit different today. So mostly Linda and I will be holding down the fort. Just to give you some context, I would like to show you a little bit of Linda's work so that you know what we are talking about and just to give a little bit of background. Let me get that pulled up 1 second. Okay, so Linda Jeffers has been an artist member since 1993. She is known for her compelling structures and assemblages, which depict dreamy scenes from both her life, from pop culture, from sort of everything. She's a collector of things. She is a great, great, great compositional artist and has now decided that she wants to move forward with a different visual language. And to do that, she's going to start by abstracting the landscape. So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring Linda on so that we can talk about it. Linda, welcome.
Welcome to you, Kelsey. Good to see you this afternoon.
How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well. The dog's asleep on the floor in the studio and all is
Fantastic. Fantastic. I'm glad to hear it. So the original plan today was to have you and James come on to talk about the landscape and not just as a straight depiction of what we see out in nature, but an abstraction of it, pulling certain things to the fore and other things into the back to create a different kind of space. Is that right?
Certainly.
Right. So tell me a little bit about let's give some context about your previous work and what you've been known for a past number of years and why you want to explore this other avenue of making.
For 12 years, I have been using found objects that I collected from all over, but generally objects that had a past.
Mm-hmm.
I would construct assemblages first, and in boxes, I would place precious objects in the boxes. But as Kelsey said, I was very conscious of composition, and it's part of me. It goes way back to my childhood. We'll talk about that later. But as I said, the object told my story so successfully that I just could not let it go. In fact, I still have in my studio some found objects that one day I'm sure they'll grab me again to compose them.
Mm-hmm.
But I've enjoyed working with these three-dimensional sculptures. However, it was last March, and we had a rain, and I walked pre-dawn. I was walking with a gray dog, so pre-dawn, gray dog. Imagine this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm walking. The streets are wet. The puddles are there. They're like glass, and they reflect the yellow green of the street light, the pale pink of the street light, the light orange of the street lights, and they're all nestled within these deep, dark, black trees that now have leaves on them, and it's like velvet. And but the sky is light. You would think that it would be just the opposite. I had a vision pretty much of how I could execute this scene in my
Mm-hmm.
own way, in my own abstracted way. But I could use 2D to do it simply because 3D would not, you know, make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm doing. I'm using the two Ds, and I'm doing lots of workouts, like a physical
Yeah.
workout. I'm feeling my way back again to the brush, feeling my way back into paint, and I'm gradually making that progression into where I want to be. And
Mm-hmm.
I have already constructed 9 panels that this scene is going to be depicted on. The main
Mm-hmm.
panel is 5 feet by 4. It'll be in the
Wow.
center, and I'll have a multiplicity of images on it. The other panels, 4 on each side, will be the same height, 5 feet, but they'll be smaller
Mm-hmm.
in width. So
So,
they'll just slowly get smaller as they go out from the centerpiece.
wow, that
And
sounds amazing.
the imagery I picture will become more minimalistic. So at
Mm-hmm.
the end, we'll
Mm-hmm.
have almost minimalistic panels. Now, I'm not a minimalist, but I do enjoy the minimalism of the simplicity. Uh, anyway, it's a joy.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and
Absolutely. So what I'm picturing, well, first of all, with that scale, that colossal scale, you're kind of just diving in head first to this arena, and it actually doesn't surprise me knowing the way that you install the work previously with your three-dimensional work and how it really engaged the space that us as gallery attendants would inhabit ourselves. So if you're going to make this transition to two-dimensional, it doesn't surprise me that we're just going to take up the whole wall and create a whole scene that engages your peripheral vision kind of in the way that you would see things naturally with less detail around the edges, pulling into a more focused place right in the middle. I think that's a really great move. That's really exciting. Um, just so the audience is aware, we were going to bring in James Burke, to this conversation because what he has been doing and what he's been known for quite a while are these abstracted landscapes. I can just show a couple of those here so that we can jump off of them as it relates to Linda's new body of work, and why this pair up was going to be such a great fit. And it still is. You know, it's still worth talking about. Um, in general. So let's go ahead and switch this so we can see it a little better here. And again, the grace of live webcast, right? Okay, so these are a couple pieces of Jim Burke's work. Jim Burke, for those who don't know, is a founding member of Baton Rouge Gallery. He has been involved with the space since it used to be called Unit 8, and then morphed into Baton Rouge Gallery in 1966. He is a mixed media artist. His work depicts the landscape from many different vantages. It also incorporates elements of domestic life, sometimes people, sometimes animal. And what his goal has been is to create new perspectives and spaces within this two-dimensional body of work, using, of course, various different media to go that road. So what I was going to do is have Linda talk about some maybe previous influences in her life that have led her to wanting to explore this avenue of two-dimensional work, and B, talk a little bit about what she's looking for in her own work, starting with this piece. Tell me about this piece.
when I was 9 years old, I had a gift come into my school. That gift was Adley Brent. She was the founder, the assistant founder, of the Arts and Science Center downtown, and a very successful artist in her own right. She saw in me, a very shy, timid child, the ability to make images that were successful in her eyes. I didn't care. I just did what gave me joy.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was 10, this piece is from when I was 10 years old, I was in the fifth grade, and she introduced abstraction. Well, this was a language I had already been speaking to my heart. I had no idea that it had a legitimate name, and it was now okay to do this. She introduced artists like Cezanne, Picasso, and Braque. She told us that we could take elements from the landscape, and we could rearrange them any way we wanted. We could change the colors if necessary. And this is what I did. I fractured up, tried to show multiplicity of the object, the front, the back, the side.
Mm-hmm.
But you see the leaf, it's recognizable. But these are and I did several of my abstractions of the real world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
There's a lot going on in this piece.
I enjoy the composition, and I knew that it was just in me that I had this desire to create order out of disorder, and I
Mm-hmm.
think I did so successfully in this piece.
I agree. Especially 9 years old. That's really incredible. I don't know that I was in a position at 9 to really understand concepts like abstraction. I'd like to hope that I was, but if I'm being honest, probably not.
Yeah, you didn't have Adley as a teacher. Those that knew her
Mm-hmm.
adored her. We respected her.
Adelaide, what was her last name?
Brent, Adelaide
Adelaide.
Brent,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
very important person. And I had her from ages 9 through 18. So she greatly influenced my life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So let's talk about, I've got a few more pieces to show here as we kind of move through your thought process into this new body of work.
sure.
Tell us what we're seeing here and when did you make this piece?
Okay, I made this piece after I left the three-dimensional sculpture uh, expression. And it still has objects. We have some pieces of branches, some found objects. It's arranged in the triptych configuration.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed working with the different materials. I always throw some obstacle in my path because that way I really grow as an artist. And in this piece, I used celluloid film. I used, on one side, we have an old fork that was broken, but I'll grab things that say what I want to say. And it's just wonderful to work with objects. So I'm still not leaving the object as you see it. Gives me some comfort still. I'm afraid to really walk away from it.
Yeah, I understand.
It's a transitional piece.
Exactly. And there are plenty of artists out there that work in 2 dimensions that still kind of push that boundary of they call it like a 2.5. It's not out in the round on a pedestal. It's not sitting on the floor taking up your body space, but it's not completely flat either. If you look at it on its side, it's got some topography happening there.
I like that 2.5.
It's a 2.5D. Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Absolutely. Okay, so what's happening here?
Okay.
I feel like I don't see any elements sticking out from this piece.
No, this is strictly oil paint on panel. I work on panel because it's rough, it's tough, you can abuse it, you can apply things like screen and sandpaper. That's what I've been using lately. Now this does not have screen or sandpaper. It is just an honest oil painting. And to me, it's early spring. Most of my work right now, of course, we are having spring. We had a luscious, beautiful spring. And this is new growth. To me, it looks like trees in the background and the earth down in the foreground. Yes, the foreground. And that I just enjoy this piece a lot because of the new life, the promise of life.
Sure, absolutely. You know what I think is really interesting? Having not known that this piece was about spring, just thinking of it like a landscape, I guess my brain would have automatically gone to more of a fall season because of the warm colors, especially up in the top. But it's interesting that you were actually thinking of springtime. So now that makes me think of the new bloom in the flowers, that kind of middle place that Louisiana tends to be at often in the springtime, where There's a lot of bright green new growth, but there's also still a lot of winter trees left in our
Right.
landscape. There's a lot of very neutral tones as a sort of constant backdrop for all of these little spots and hits of color.
That's why they're so vibrant, because
yeah,
of that. Yeah.
because they're up against that kind of middle nothing color. You know what I mean?
The grays, the grays,
Yeah,
the grays make the colors sing.
yeah. And just audience, so that you know, for the people watching both on our YouTube and our Facebook, you are more than welcome to comment and engage with us while we are broadcasting live. We can see and show those comments and react to them directly. And then, as is the case after every broadcast, I always encourage our artists to hop on our Facebook and respond to whatever comments we weren't able to get to. So if you're watching this later on in the day and we've already ended the live broadcast, go ahead and comment anyway, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. Okay, so back to Linda's work. Now this looks like watercolor. Is that right?
Yes, this is.
Ooh,
and I'm trying different forms of paint, not just oils, but I love the translucency of watercolor. And this, again, elements of the landscape. They may be tilted and skewed, but there is a hint of water, trees, branches. It's for the audience to enjoy and the audience to interpret. It's
Sure.
not my interpretation. I mean, I may have a feeling about a piece, but the audience does too. And that's what I want. I want them to take home something that they see in their memory. And
bring their own sort of content to it,
yes,
right? Yeah.
Yes.
You know what I always love about a lot of water-based media, and you can do this with oils, but it needs to be very intentional. But with watercolor especially, and with some acrylics, depending on how you do it, there seems to be a sense of it being backlit, you know?
That's
So
right.
your tones in your oranges and your reds, and even some of your jewel tones, like your purples and pinks in here, they kind of sing in a different way than oil paint or even a three-dimensional surface with the paint on top of it does. It's just a different language almost.
That's a wonderful observation, Kelsey. Thank you for that. You're so right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Art school, man.
That's what it's all about.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I just love this piece. I think it's really great. We have a couple more to get through. Now, based on the picture, if I had to guess, let's see if I can guess the media here. We have some maybe pastels, maybe oils, maybe acrylics. I kind of can't tell based on the texture. What are we seeing?
Okay, we see first acrylic. And this was just a really quick painting I did. I had no idea the background, the blues and the whites, and then there were some darks at the bottom. Hints of things. And I decided to push it further and to give the foreground some form. And, you know, I see these thorny shapes, which I'm very well known for. I do like the way thorns pierce into space and create a beautiful negative space around them. So those are developed. Then the light seems to draw me back. And there's a hint of moss, because in the morning I do see moss. I don't do swamp and bayou scenes, but there is a hint. There's a hint of moss there, and you could have that feeling about perhaps being in the swamp.
Sure. I mean, I know that everywhere where people are, they feel like their local landscape is just overdone. But honestly, as visual artists, which is, you know, the only type of art I can really speak to, we are sort of a product of our literal surroundings. And I think that being aware of certain trends that are maybe a little overused is good to just know about them. But at the same time, you can't necessarily go about ignoring all of those things that so many artists have flocked to in the first place, because there is a certain magic about them, right? So I think this kind of abstracted scene, even though it's very loose, you know, and like you said, very quick, and it's got a kind of breath to it, it still does feel like a swampy scene to me. Like, I feel like if I saw this in upstate New York, I'd be like, oh, that's the bayou, you know. um, for what it's worth. I mean,
Yeah, it's amazing how the painting paints itself and tells you
yeah,
what it is.
right,
It
right.
presents itself to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we got just a couple more here. If
Certainly.
I had to say this plant, or I assume it feels like a plant to me, but it also feels very menacing, like it's going to come get me.
Yes, those are those sharp forms that I like
Mhm.
so much, and they can be menacing. But this is a plant form, and in my mind, I have lots of plants that I've seen, and you know, visual artists, as you know, we just file these images away, and then we pull them out when we make a piece of artwork. And so that's what I did. I just sort of pulled out images that I had filed
Mhm.
away.
Mhm.
And this is acrylic, and I love acrylic I carved into it with the handle of the brush, and there's a little fine thread in there that has just a tiny hint of metallic, but you can barely see it.
Yeah,
Uh,
that might be something that better translates when you see the piece in person.
yes,
You know,
and there's a
I
lot
see
of
this piece behind your shoulder here, which, you know, it even has a different feel behind you with the scale than it does uh, with the scale up against our little heads, you know, digitally, right?
right. But
But
there's a lot of activity on the surface. I like activity on the surface.
mhm.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Kelsey, which I
No,
did.
that was the end of my thought.
Okay. This, believe it or not, this is street candy, street ornaments, street candy. These, this is an echo and a visual remembrance of the street lights. Uh,
Oh, right.
and
Okay.
the yellows glow, and that's what
Hmm.
happens. They peek in, they recede. And this started out as a collage. And I'm using collage too, because it again is something I can touch, pick up,
Hmm.
and place where I want it. That's how I like the found objects. I could move them around and put them in different configurations. But it
Hmm.
started off with this one piece, and I said, "Oh, I kind of just like it is." But then it kept speaking to me, and I kept moving it around. And this is a finished product, and that's on sandpaper. You know,
Hmm.
it's a challenge to see what happens when your paint drags across that wonderful toothy surface.
That's so
And
interesting.
yeah, I use gouache on this. I don't usually use gouache. I
Hmm.
started with gouache. I have some Sennelier pastels in there,
Hmm.
uh, and a little charcoal, just lots of subtle little changes in media.
You know, that's interesting that you picked some super soft medias like pastel and charcoal to use on something so rigid and tough like sandpaper. And I think that probably adds to this sort of airy, breathy, in movement feel to this piece that maybe the acrylic or the oil pieces don't have because they are a heavier presence. Um, I'm not sure where I'm going with that point. I just thought it's, you know, that's an interesting choice.
But it is a good point, Kelsey. Yeah, the contradiction. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
And
interesting.
this is, yeah. I love to have mixed media that you can't tell what
Hmm.
it is. So the viewer says, "What is that?" I don't know. They all sort of they're wedded together. You can't
Hmm.
pull one apart. And
Well,
that,
each different, oh, sorry.
no, you go ahead.
I was going to say, well, each different media has its own characteristics. They have their own voice. Like, we're talking about different paints, even between gouache and watercolor, which essentially are both watercolor. The difference
True.
is that gouache is an opaque, kind of thicker watercolor, you know, and then you move to acrylic, which is like a polymer, and oil, which is obviously oil and ground up pigment, but they all have a different voice. It's like
Mhm.
like when you go to a concert at like a symphony, you know, it's, you have like your brass section, you have your strings, you have your, you
Mhm.
know, your drums. They all serve an important purpose, but they all do their specific thing. And
True.
it's like what you're doing here with this mixed media, with the collaging, and with the different, even different types of paints that you're using, is you're kind of orchestrating this whole new, I don't know, eyeball sound. You know what
I
I'm saying?
like that. I like that. I like that, Kelsey. I like that very
which is
much.
really a joy to look at. And I can't wait to see some of these in person, especially that big piece that you said you're working on. That's going to be really something.
Yeah, that's going to take some time. It's
Well,
going to be a
yeah,
physical feat too. I've got to really work out, really push, keep my muscles strong and my energy level up.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I believe this was the last slide of the work in progress. Is there anything that you want to add to the process, or any specific questions that you're looking to answer with this work? I know that a lot of times for many artists, they say that they start with a single question, but making the work creates many, many, many more questions, which
That's
then
true.
generates more work. Has that been your experience diving into this world, or how do you
Uh,
feel about it?
well, it certainly opens up lots of different options if I
Hmm.
work with these pieces. Uh, and I've got all sorts of media just kind of lying around on this center table. Well, it's a long vertical table,
Hmm.
and that's why I'll leave things out. I'm not a neat artist. I don't put things away because I'll probably need them anyway. But so I'm putting charcoal with even some gesso, and it's I'm in my lab. I call it, this
Hmm.
is experimentation.
Yeah.
And I tell my students, that happy accidents, that, oh goodness, I made a mistake. But that's when our work gets really good, when we get off our chosen path, that rut that we're so comfortable in. That's when
Hmm.
our work increases. And we have to try new things. But I love happy accidents. When I was working with found objects, things would break.
Yeah.
And it was almost like, oh, good. This is just what I needed. I can use this piece. It's just, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
why I love this work. It's open ended.
Yeah,
It's,
it's almost similar to with the found objects. I feel like with a lot of your work, they kind of have they arrive at a place of finish, like they just, you can feel it when they're done. When it comes to two-dimensional work, I wonder if that finish line is a little more of a gradient, a little more muddy.
you're right, Kelsey. You brought up something very important. That is so true. That is so true. Yeah.
Yeah,
You don't want to overwork. You want to keep the freshness. You don't
mhm.
want to overwork. And that is a hard line.
Yeah,
Yeah,
something
yeah.
that I was taught that I still struggle with. I mean, even years after my MFA, I still have an issue with this. Is that if you do overwork a piece, you have to keep working on it if you want to save it. Like you have to way overwork it to bring it back, to bring some life back into it. And
Mhm.
especially with layering things like with painting and collage, that just demonstrates itself in every moment of the making process. Like things will become great. You'll have this piece here, and you got this bright little color over here, and then disaster. And then if you have any hope of saving this piece, you have to spend almost twice as much time on it. You got to pour more out into it. And I feel like it's just a different way to think about work that isn't quite the same in my experience working in 3 dimensions. You know what I
I,
mean?
did have any of your instructors told you that your worst pieces become your best pieces? I mean, I was told that in grad school.
I was
That
told that in undergrad. Grad school was a different battle.
I know we both, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, oof, yeah. But yeah, that did happen sometimes. And honestly, I feel like sometimes years later is when I recognize the truth in those statements. Like if I still have a piece from years and years ago that a mentor or an artist that I really admired said, "Oh, I like this piece," and at the time I was like, "That, like, what is that? That's nothing." I spent 10 minutes on that. You know what I mean? And then years and years later, I finally see what it is that they saw. And then, of course, there's like an existential trouble to get back to that. It's a whole thing. Um, but I guess that's part of the fun of being in our lab,
And
right?
it's a challenge and it's hard work. So many people think that it's not. That it's so
Hmm.
easy. You just put paint down and let it go. But it's an intellectual
Yeah,
process.
it's a
It's
struggle.
it's a physical process. It engages the entire body and mind.
Yeah, I agree. And that's not to say that it's not enjoyable in any way, because it certainly can
no.
be.
Right. I
But in
like
the
the
same
fact.
way that, sorry, you like
No,
what?
I like the fact that it engages the whole person.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Okay, well, we're coming up on the half-hour mark, so I'm going to go ahead and let you go so you can continue your afternoon in the studio and enjoy in pain, right?
No rain.
Yeah, well, so, it's only been raining lightly here, so hopefully that hasn't interfered too much with my upload quality. Let's see, we have, oh, we have an audience member checking in all the way from Arizona. Hi, Jim. Thank you for joining us. Fun fact, that's my grandpa.
I thought probably he was a relative, yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, Linda, thank you so much for joining us. I really
It's a
appreciate it. I'm real
pleasure.
sorry. Yeah, sorry about the tech issues we were having earlier, but that's okay. That's just motivation to get you and James Burke in the same room sometime to talk about your work. So
We
I'll
will
see
do
if
that.
that
We will
happens.
do that under your supervision.
Yes.
Thank you, Kelsey. You've done a beautiful job.
I appreciate it.
you.
All right, have a good afternoon.
Okay.
Bye-bye. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. This has been Artists in Residences by Baton Rouge Gallery. Our next episode will air on this Friday at 1 o'clock. We hope to see you then. Have a good day. Take care.